I'm Manveen Rana, Innovations Editor here at Hub Culture Davos 2024, and I'm delighted to be joined by Troy Demmer from Gecko Robotics. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. One of the big themes here at Davos this year is climate. Everybody's talking about the environment, and energy is coming up an awful lot too. Tell us, firstly, the conversations you've been having around it, and also sort of what Gecko is thinking about when you're looking at the environment in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the conversation shifted a little bit since the last 12 months. When I was here last year, the conversation was, how do we hold that line at about 2 degrees warming globally? And as we look at our progress being made on that, it's been challenging, to be clear.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for that is the investment needed to create renewable energy forms and sustainable energy forms, and it's difficult to do this when the global need for energy is just increasing massively. The developing world needs a lot more energy, a lot more quickly, and so we can do this in places where the energy demands aren't growing that much, like Western countries. But at the end of the day, we really need to think about, okay, as we increase the energy needs across the world, how do we do that in a sustainable way? And one of the ways that Gecko is approaching that is by looking at not just the new builds, not just the things that is going to be built in the future, nuclear fusion, green hydrogen. These are projects that we will support as they come online. But we're also looking at the infrastructure we have today, the critical assets that power the world today. How do you make them more efficient and sustainable in their current form and enable this transition to happen in due time?
What is the answer?
And
how do you do it?
And the answer is, like, we think a lot about, and to give just a very tangible example, if you can measure the health of the asset, if you, just like we understand the health of our own bodies quite well, if you can understand really how the asset is performing, you can make certain improvements to it. You can change its efficiencies. You can keep it online when it needs to. The startups and shutdowns are really costly to the environment. And not to mention, when something leaks or you have a catastrophic incident, those are a bunch of fugitive emissions that are getting directly out into the environment. So we can keep those contained and give us time to have some of these more transformative technologies come online.
So you are having a direct impact in trying to help lower emissions and trying to sort of help the environment. Have you been surprised by any of the conversations you're having here? Because although, as you say, things have got worse since this time last year, it feels like fewer people are talking about ESG. There's a sense that politically too, we're seeing a bit of rowing back. What has that been like here?
Well, I think it's really like we haven't lost progress. We just haven't made as much progress as we wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think a big challenge to that is, renewables are incredibly hard to bring online. You can put solar panels in the ground or wind turbines, in a high wind area, but it's about connecting it to the grid. How do you actually get that transmission of energy to the places that need it? And this can be done more easily here in the U.S., but emissions, they aren't bounded. They go everywhere. And so trying to set up this infrastructure, we have our grid is in the best condition, and this is part of Gecko's core competency. However, the grids elsewhere don't even exist. If we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, if we're talking about in places in the Indo-Pacific even.
Much harder. And for you, having been here last year, having seen in that space of time not much has happened that should have done, are you leaving Davos optimistic or quite pessimistic about where we go with environmental goals by this time next year?
It's going to take a coordinated effort, and the other macro environment that's going on is we're kind of decoupling from each other in a way that's makes this more challenging as supply chains get evaluated and critical minerals to build these new forms of energy. I think a lot of people are doing what they can to shore up their own environments, and so that, again, going back to the emissions aren't bounded, it's going to be challenging to help in an area when you're trying to shore up your own resources. And it's not meant to sound self-serving, but the reality is foreign direct investment is not happening at the pace that it once was.
Well, thanks very much for talking over one of the biggest talking points here at Davos this year. It's been a pleasure to be chatting. Troy Demmer, I'm Manveen Rana.
Thank you.